everyone, thanks so much for following along on how to draw Mickey and Minnie Valentine's Day edition. You first want to go ahead and start drawing by drawing 2 circles to indicate where Mickey and Minnie's faces will be. This just helps you with the placement of the characters on the paper. Then go ahead and draw 2 perpendicular lines. These are curved in this case, but they also intersect, making them perpendicular, to indicate where you want the center of their face will be. Wherever your lines intersect is where you want Minnie's nose to be. So I've gone ahead and drawn Minnie's nose bridge, which is somewhat oval in shape, and then I've drawn her nose on top of that and her eyes a little to the left of the nose. Now I tend to sketch rather lightly, so hopefully you can see what I'm doing here. But after I draw those features, I'm able to outline her cheek to give her the rest of her face. To me, I always start with the nose because the nose is the center point of all characters' faces. Once you go ahead and do Minnie, you can use 2 perpendicular lines to draw for Mickey, again showing you wherever you want your nose to be. So using those lines, go ahead and drawing his nose bridge, also indicating where you want his cheek to be. And then based off of the placement of the nose, you can go ahead and draw the eyes a little to the right and a little down from the nose bridge. Mickey and Minnie's noses are pretty oval in shape. They are not circular, so keep that in mind when you're drawing their noses. I have both Minnie and Mickey at a slight angle because I have their faces lifted upwards in order to give each other a kiss. So everything's not completely horizontal, meaning that I've drawn their faces at a little bit of an angle. But using the nose and the eyes as your starting point, I've then drawn Minnie and Mickey's cheeks. And then you can go ahead and use the original circle that you drew to help you shape the rest of the face. Now you have their face and it's starting to take shape, and you can start adding in other features. For Minnie is her bow. For Minnie's bow, you really want to start using curvy shapes or lines in order to draw this key feature of Minnie Mouse. I would say her bow is about a third of the size of her face. And then once you draw her bow, you can go ahead and draw her ears. Minnie and Mickey's ears are pretty circular, but they're not completely circular, so they have somewhat of a curve to them that's a little bit oval. You want to draw their ears very, very close together, but you do not want them touching. Now after you draw Minnie's face, you're able to draw the rest of her body. In this case, I'm able to draw her shoulder. Now her dress obviously is covering her shoulder, so you can indicate where you want her shoulder pads, I guess you could call them, to be. And then using those to create her arms, which I'm going to be having them extend outwards because she's having her arms behind her so that she can give Mickey a kiss. Once you draw her arms, then you can go ahead and start drawing in her hands. Again, her hands are extended because she's giving Mickey a kiss. Mickey and Minnie do not have 5 fingers, they have 4. So I've gone ahead and drawn Minnie's thumb with her 3 fingers, and then you can go ahead and draw the rest of her dress. Again, I have Minnie and Mickey at an angle here, so her dress curves underneath her because she's reaching out and extending to give Mickey that kiss. Based on the dress, you can go ahead and start drawing her leg. So her leg starts about, I would say, a little to the left of where her face is. Again, because she's extending outward. And you can go ahead and draw her shoe after you draw her leg. Again, using basic shapes to start. And I do tend to sketch rather lightly because to me, this first sketch is a very rough sketch. And you can go ahead and use this rough sketch to make any changes that you want later on. So making sure that her dress is curved, I now have her arms and her legs based on the positioning of her dress. I'm also adding in her left arm so that you can see a little bit of a silhouette of her arm. Making sure that her dress is pretty curved. And now you can start drawing Mickey. Again, like Minnie, his face is at an angle, which is sometimes tricky to draw. Whenever I draw, I also tend to draw towards myself, which is why I'm turning the paper here. One artist told me that when you draw towards yourself, meaning that the lines or your pencil comes towards your body as you draw, that means that you have more control, and I absolutely agree. Again, based on using the circle that you originally drew, it can help you draw the final positioning of Mickey's face. And then you can go ahead and draw his ears. Again, nothing set in stone, which is why I decided to lower one of Mickey's ears here. Mickey's ears, I would say, are a lot more oval than Minnie's. I'm not sure why, but to me they are. So making his ears a little oval in shape. What I tend to do is darken any lines that I think are more finalized, which is what I've done with Mickey's head. Now, like Minnie, Mickey is also curved because he's extending himself to give Minnie that kiss. So I go ahead and draw Mickey's arm, which is all the way extending backwards. And then based upon his arm positioning, I'm drawing his hands and fingers. Again, remembering that he does not have 5 fingers, but he only has 4. Hands are somewhat tricky for me to draw, so I usually lightly draw them and then I make any modifications later. Like Minnie, he is curved, so he is really reaching forward, so his body is not directly under his head, which is why I've drawn the rest of his body a little to the right of his head. You can start seeing his shorts take shape, and based upon where his shorts are, I've drawn his legs. Minnie and Mickey's legs should be pretty similar in that they should be touching the ground at the same length, I guess, or height. So making sure that those are pretty symmetrical and in line, which is one of the reasons why I've changed it in this video. Again, nothing is ever set in stone during this rough sketch, but it's really to gently outline where you want some of your bigger shapes or bigger body parts or characteristics to be. Then I went ahead and added Mickey's buttons on his shorts, so you can really see him starting to take shape and he's extending outward. Again, like Minnie, I've added in a little silhouette of his right arm. So now you have the basic outline of Mickey and Minnie. And once you have that, I go ahead and start outlining some of the finalized features in a darker pen or pencil. In this case, I'm using a red pencil. Whenever I go ahead and sketch, I use a darker color to outline and lighter colors to really sketch any colors on the inside. Same thing for Minnie. I know that the positioning of her dress is exactly how I want it, so I've gone ahead and started to outline her dress this way. Her bow can also be outlined because I really like how I drew that at the beginning. So anything that you're happy with, you can go ahead and outline. Or if you're not completely happy with any of the positionings of anything, then you can go ahead and use this opportunity to bold or darken any lines with the adjustments that you want to make. I decided to add some dots on Minnie Mouse to make her classic Minnie Mouse. Minnie always rocks the dots, so adding in dots to me really makes her character come full circle. The dots are always pretty small, and I usually include them on the bow as well. But now that I have the outline of the dress, I can really start to go ahead and fill in the dress with any color. I sketched pretty lightly, and I'm using a lighter color red than I used to outline. Just going in there and lightly coloring with some lines and some shading because I want her to have a red dress. Alright, Minnie's dress is pretty done. And now what I'm going to do after I added what I call a base layer, so one layer of red, now I'm going to go in and shade any other parts of her dress that I think should be a little bit darker to indicate a shadow. So for example, underneath her arm, I've created a little bit of shadow. Underneath her shoulders and her face, I'm creating a little bit of shadow. It's very subtle, but I think it's just a nice touch to include on your sketches. One artist once told me that you have to pick a light source, which helps you indicate where you want your shadows to be. So my light source is going to be coming in from the top, from above Mickey or Minnie, which is why you see shadows to the left and underneath any features such as her arms. Again, using the same shading and coloring techniques on her bow, I've added some dots on Minnie's bow. But adding in that base layer, which means you're really just adding in one layer of the same color. And then you can go ahead and go back in and really darken any areas that you want to have a so-called shadow. So now that I have her dress and bow done, I'm going to go ahead and start on her heels. Minnie has the cutest heels and the cutest shoes. And what I do is I outline in the color that her shoes will be, but the darkest color. So her shoes are yellow, so I'm outlining here in a, I think this is goldenrod, if you use Faber-Castells or Prismacolor pencils. But going ahead and outlining in a very yellowish, brownish orange color. And then going ahead and using a base layer of yellow, so one layer of yellow. Mickey and Minnie shoes are pretty much the same color, so I'm going to be coloring them at the same time. And going ahead and using a darker shade of yellow to make it so that there's a little bit of contrast and so that there are some shadows, I guess you can call them, in the drawing. This just helps you make it more of a 3D look instead of just something that's one color throughout the entire drawing. I tend to do black areas after I do other areas of the face or the drawing, mostly because black is it's the darkest color and it's the most forgiving color. So if I make any mistakes or I accidentally draw over something, it's fine because I've already drawn in my other colors. So here's where I start to make some adjustments to Minnie's face, if I have any in mind. Again, using the nose and her nose bridge as the center of the face to create all of her other features. Drawing in her cheek there. She's slightly at an angle, which makes it a little more difficult to draw. And then filling in where her ears will be. You can start outlining her arms because they are also black. And start to outline her hands and her fingers. Again, her fingers, she only has 4 fingers. And I'm making them extended a little bit. Her fingers are very smooth and round in shape. So while they're pointed, they're also curved at the same time. Also drawing a silhouette of her other hand and adding in those classic 3 lines to her gloves. Now I can go ahead and start with the legs, making oval shapes. Again, you want to use basic shapes as much as possible. And now you can move on to Mickey here. I almost always start with Mickey and Minnie's noses. To me, the nose is absolutely the center of the face. So it helps me base all the other features based upon the nose and their positioning. Going ahead and outlining his eyes. Mickey does not have eyelashes. And then you can go ahead and outline the rest of his face. Again, using this time to really make any adjustments that you found you want to make during your rough sketch. I always turn the paper because it offers me more control. So don't be afraid to turn the paper whenever you're drawing. Now I can start outlining his arms. Mickey's arms and Minnie's arms should be pretty similar in length. So just making sure that you account for those. Hands are always a little bit tricky for me to draw, so bear with me here. Again, using those 3 classic lines on his gloves. And then you can go ahead and start to draw his legs. Right there, I just made an adjustment because I wanted his legs to be a little bit wider than I had originally drawn. And then I can begin shading. After shading, I usually darken the outside of Mickey's legs, just so that you can clearly see where they start and where they begin. And now you can go ahead and start shading in the rest of his body. Again, using the same technique of using a light source, which is really just a fancy name for where the sun or the light bulb would be, so that you know where to place your shadows. Whenever I sketch or fill in a sketch, I always go from top to bottom, which is why you'll see lines within Mickey's arms where I'm sketching and shading currently. Now moving on to his ears, with the same concept, sketching from the top to the bottom. Also using this time to darken any outlined lines so that you can clearly see the shapes of Mickey, because he has so much black that you want there to be some type of definition. The same concept applies to the rest of his face. Now he's really starting to take shape. You can always go back in and shade darker in some areas or lighter in some areas. And now we can move on to Minnie. Same concept, sketching up and down to create those dark black lines for her face. I always put down a base color, so one color of the black, and then go back in and darken anywhere that I want to have shadows. Really being diligent with the black lines that I have. Sketching over the first base layer just to darken anything, and then I will go over and darken or bolden any lines that indicate the start and stopping points of the arms, legs, or face. I almost always end with black just because it is the darkest color there is, so if you do make any mistakes with the other colors, you can always color over it with black. And now that I've darkened some of her legs a little bit, I did go over those lines and I bolded them so you can see them more clearly. Same thing with the nose. I almost always make one part of the nose darker than the other part of the nose, just so that it gives it some sort of texture look. Alright, now Mickey and Minnie are almost done. Going back in and coloring or filling in Mickey's pants with the red. Again, I used a darker color to outline the pants and am now using a lighter color red to fill in the pant color. This allows you to see the lines of the pants better, and to me it just provides a cleaner look. And then using your light source once again to figure out where you want any kind of shadows. So putting some shadows under Mickey's arm and on the bottom of his pants. I also am darkening the leg that is furthest away from you so that you know that there is a difference between the two in terms of how close they are together. So there you have it, you're almost done with your drawing. I decided to go over and add some coloring to the face. Mickey and Minnie have minimal coloring, so adding in a light beige color to fill it in. And now is really the time where you can look at your drawing and see if there's any touch-ups. I also went ahead and added a little darker beige to give it a little bit more contrast for the face, and darkened in some of the eyelids so that it pops out a little bit more. I almost always use a couple colors whenever I color. This just allows it to provide some more detail for your drawings. And then I almost always pass over it with the base layer, what I call, so the first color that you laid down, I usually finish with that layer as well. Alright, so we are pretty much done. Now's that time where you can look over your drawing, see if there's anything that you want to touch up. For me, it's erasing any additional lines that I've had originally, and then you're pretty much done. So thanks so much for following along. Hope you had fun drawing Mickey and Minnie.